Monsieur Laurent was a man of great wealth and quiet pride. After years of hard work and smart investments, he had finally bought his dream estate in a small, beautiful town in the south of France. The house was old but elegant, with tall windows, wide gardens, and a view that stretched out to the rolling hills. For Laurent, it was more than just a property, it was a symbol of his success and a new chapter in his life. On a bright spring morning, Laurent arrived at the estate with his small luggage and a calm smile. He had spent many months preparing for this moment. He looked around carefully, admiring the tall trees lining the driveway and the freshly painted gates. The air smelled of blooming flowers and fresh earth, a welcome change from the busy city where he had lived before. Waiting for him at the entrance was Monsieur Dupont, the estate's new manager. Dupont was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a serious face. He had worked in many estates before and believed himself to be the best at his job. He wore a perfectly ironed suit and spoke French with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. "Welcome, Monsieur Laurent," Dupont said with a polite bow. "We are honored to have you here." Laurent nodded and smiled politely. "Thank you, Monsieur Dupont. I look forward to working with you." As they walked inside the grand hall of the house, Dupont pointed out the different rooms and the staff quarters. Laurent listened carefully, happy to know that things were already in order. But deep down, Dupont felt a small worry. Laurent spoke French very well, better than Dupont had expected. Over the next few hours, Laurent moved through the estate, checking the garden plans, the kitchen, and the wine cellar. Dupont followed closely, answering questions and making notes. Every time Laurent spoke to the staff or gave an order, he did so in perfect French, with a clear, confident voice. Dupont's heart began to race. He had always prided himself on his command of the French language. It was not just a tool for communication but a symbol of his status and intelligence. Now, facing a millionaire who spoke French like a native, Dupont felt small and uncertain. After the tour, Laurent sat down in the drawing room. The room was decorated with old paintings, velvet curtains, and heavy wooden furniture. Laurent pulled out a small notebook and began to plan. Dupont cleared his throat and spoke carefully. "Monsieur Laurent, if I may, the staff here are well trained. But I understand that you might have special preferences or instructions." Laurent looked up and smiled kindly. "Yes, Monsieur Dupont. I do have some ideas. I want everything to be perfect here. The estate should feel like home." Dupont nodded quickly. "Of course, Monsieur. I will make sure of it." But inside, Dupont's mind was racing. Could he keep up with Laurent? Could he prove that he was capable of managing such a fine estate and impressing a man who seemed so confident and skilled? As the sun began to set, Laurent decided to take a walk in the garden. The flowers were bright, and the air was cool and fresh. Dupont followed at a distance, still feeling uneasy. Suddenly, Laurent stopped and turned to Dupont. "Tell me, Monsieur Dupont, where do you come from? Your French is very refined." Dupont smiled nervously. "Thank you, Monsieur. I was born here in this region. I have worked in many estates across France." Laurent nodded thoughtfully. "Ah, I see. I spent some years in Paris myself. I love the language and the culture. It is important to me that those who work here appreciate it as well." Dupont felt a pang of anxiety. Did Laurent suspect that his French was not as perfect as it sounded? Did he notice the small mistakes Dupont sometimes made when speaking quickly? That evening, after Laurent had retired to his room, Dupont sat alone in the office. He opened a French dictionary and began to study. He repeated words and phrases softly, trying to perfect his accent and grammar. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock. Dupont's mind was filled with worry. He had always believed that his skills and knowledge were enough to keep his job safe. But now, with Monsieur Laurent's arrival, he felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Outside, the moon rose over the estate, casting silver light on the garden paths. Dupont looked out the window, thinking of the challenges ahead. He did not yet know that the estate held more surprises that would change everything he thought he knew about loyalty, language, and respect. For now, the evening was calm. But for Dupont, the real test was just beginning. The next morning, the estate was alive with activity. The sun shone brightly over the gardens, and birds sang in the tall trees. Inside the house, the staff moved quickly, preparing breakfast and tidying rooms. Monsieur Dupont woke early, but his mind was heavy with worry. He walked slowly to the dining room, where Monsieur Laurent was already seated at the long wooden table. Laurent was reading a newspaper, his calm face showing no sign of concern. Dupont took a deep breath and sat down, trying to keep his nerves under control. As breakfast was served, Laurent began speaking to the maid in French, asking about the fresh bread and the timing of the deliveries. His French was smooth and fast, full of expressions that Dupont found difficult to follow. Dupont tried to listen carefully, but the words seemed to blur together. After breakfast, Laurent met with a few local business people who had come to discuss matters of the estate. Dupont stood nearby, hoping to keep up with the conversation. But the French spoken by Laurent and the visitors was filled with complicated words and fast exchanges. Dupont struggled to understand every detail. He felt a cold sweat on his forehead. What if Laurent noticed his struggle? What if the millionaire thought Dupont was not smart enough to manage the estate? The thought made Dupont's heart race. He had spent years building his career, and he was not ready to lose everything now. During a short break, Dupont stepped outside to clear his head. The garden was peaceful, but his thoughts were noisy. He remembered his years of experience, the careful way he had learned the language, and how proud he felt of his skills. But today, facing Laurent's perfect French, he felt small and unsure. As Dupont stood by a rose bush, he heard footsteps behind him. It was Amara, the maid who worked quietly in the house. Amara was a young woman with calm eyes and a gentle smile. She moved with grace, always respectful but strong in her own way. "Is everything all right, Monsieur Dupont?" Amara asked softly. Dupont hesitated but then nodded. "Yes, Amara. Just, a lot to think about." Amara looked at him kindly. "Monsieur Laurent speaks very well. It can be hard to keep up, but I am sure you will manage." Dupont was surprised by her confidence. "You speak French very well too," he said. "Where did you learn?" Amara smiled. "I was born in Senegal. I studied in Paris for some years before coming here. French is my first language." Dupont's eyes widened. He had never known this about Amara. She had always been quiet and polite, working behind the scenes without drawing attention. But now, he saw her in a new light. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Dupont asked. Amara shrugged gently. "I am just a maid, monsieur. I did not think it was important." Dupont thought about this. Maybe he had been too quick to judge. He realized he had not really looked at Amara's abilities before, only her role in the house. As the day went on, Dupont tried harder to keep up with Laurent's fast French. He read books and listened to the radio, hoping to improve. But his worry grew. He feared that one day, Laurent would ask something he could not answer. That evening, Dupont sat alone in his office, staring at a letter from Laurent. The letter was written in perfect French, with careful sentences and polite requests. Dupont read it again and again, trying to understand every word. Suddenly, there was a soft knock on the door. Amara entered quietly, carrying a tray with tea and a small plate of cookies. "I thought you might like some company," she said gently. Dupont smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Amara. You are very kind." She sat down across from him. "If you want, I can help you with the French. I know the language well." DuPont looked at her, surprised and touched. Would you really do that? Amara nodded. Yes. I want the estate to be a good place for everyone. If I can help, I will. For the first time that evening, DuPont felt hope. Maybe he did not have to face this challenge alone. Maybe, with Amara's help, he could find the strength to overcome his fear. As they talked quietly, DuPont realized that language was more than just words. It was about trust, respect, and the courage to ask for help when needed. Outside, the stars began to shine, and the estate was calm. Inside, two people from different worlds found a connection that might change everything. Amara moved quietly through the halls of the estate, carrying a small basket of fresh linens. She had worked here for several months, but few really knew much about her. To the staff, she was just the maid, polite, efficient, and always ready to help. But beneath her calm appearance was a story that no one had yet heard. Born in a small town in Senegal, Amara's childhood was filled with dreams of faraway places and different cultures. Her parents had always valued education, and when she was old enough, they sent her to Paris to study. There, she learned not only the French language but also history, literature, and the arts. She loved the beauty of the language, the way it could express deep feelings and ideas. But life in Paris was not easy for Amara. As a young black woman in a foreign country, she faced many challenges and moments of loneliness. She worked hard to prove herself, but sometimes the world seemed to close doors in her face. When the opportunity came to work at the estate in the French countryside, she accepted, hoping for a fresh start. Now, standing in the quiet hallways, Amara thought about her life. She was far from home, far from her family, but she carried their hopes with her. She took pride in her work and the small community she was part of here. One morning, as the estate prepared for another busy day, Amara heard footsteps behind her. It was Monsieur DuPont, the manager. He looked serious but kinder than usual. Amara, he said softly, may I speak with you for a moment? She nodded and followed him to a small room near the kitchen. It was a simple office, with a desk and a few chairs. I want to thank you, DuPont began, for your offer to help me with French. I did not expect such kindness. Amara smiled gently. It is no problem, Monsieur DuPont. We all need help sometimes. DuPont looked thoughtful. I have been worried since Monsieur Laurent arrived. His French is very perfect. I fear I cannot keep up. Amara listened carefully. You should not be afraid. Language is not only about words. It is about understanding people. If you want, I can help you prepare for meetings or letters. DuPont's eyes brightened. Thank you, Amara. Your support means a lot. Over the next few days, Amara and DuPont began to meet quietly after work. She taught him phrases, pronunciation, and common expressions used in the town. DuPont found himself learning not just language but also about Amara's world, her experiences, her dreams. One afternoon, as they practiced together in the library, a sudden knock came at the door. It was Laurent, the millionaire. I hope I am not interrupting, he said politely. I wanted to ask about the garden plans. DuPont stood quickly. Monsieur Laurent, this is Amara. She has been helping me improve my French. Laurent smiled warmly. It is a pleasure to meet you, Amara. I hear you speak French very well. Amara blushed slightly but nodded. Thank you, monsieur. It is true. Laurent looked thoughtful. Language is a bridge. It brings us closer. I am glad you are here. After Laurent left, DuPont looked at Amara with new respect. You are more than just a maid, Amara. You are a teacher and a friend. Amara shook her head gently. I am still just the maid. But I want to do my best for this estate. Their friendship grew quietly, built on trust and shared goals. DuPont's fear slowly turned into determination. He realized that he did not have to pretend to be perfect. With Amara's help, he could be honest and strong. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Amara sat by the window. She thought about the journey ahead. She knew challenges awaited them, but for the first time, she felt hope. The estate was not just a place to work. It was a new home where respect and kindness could grow. Outside, the garden glowed in the soft light. Inside, two people from different worlds found a way to speak the same language, not just with words, but with heart. The morning sun cast soft light over the estate, and the birds filled the air with their cheerful songs. It was a busy day. Monsieur Laurent had invited a local businessman and a few important guests to the estate to discuss future plans for the property and the nearby village. The visit was meant to be private and serious. Monsieur Dupont stood near the entrance hall, straightening his jacket and practicing calm in his chest. His mind was busy with worry. He had been studying French harder than ever, with Amara's help, but he still felt unsure about speaking in front of important visitors. Laurent arrived dressed in his usual elegant manner. He greeted the guests with warm smiles and firm handshakes. His French was smooth and quick, full of confident expressions. Dupont watched closely, trying to follow every word. As the meeting began in the large drawing room, Laurent spoke about plans to improve the estate's farm and support the local market. The guests asked many questions, some of them complicated and full of business terms. Dupont tried to listen carefully and understand everything, but the fast pace and difficult words made it hard. Suddenly, one guest turned to Dupont and asked him a question. Dupont's heart jumped. He was not ready. Monsieur Dupont, the guest said politely but firmly, what are your thoughts on the new irrigation system proposed for the estate? Dupont swallowed hard. His mouth went dry. He opened his mouth to answer, but the words did not come. His mind went blank. The room grew quiet. Everyone looked at Dupont. Laurent's eyes searched Dupont's face, waiting. Amara was standing quietly near the door, watching the scene with concern. She saw the panic on Dupont's face and knew he needed help. Without hesitation, Amara stepped forward and spoke in clear, perfect French. "Excuse me, monsieur," she said calmly. "If I may, the new irrigation system will help distribute water evenly across the fields. It will reduce waste and improve crop growth. It is a good plan for the estate." The guests looked surprised but pleased. Laurent smiled warmly at Amara. "Merci, Amara," Laurent said. "That was very helpful." Dupont felt a mix of relief and embarrassment. He looked at Amara with gratitude. She had saved the moment when he could not. After the meeting, Laurent called Dupont aside. "Monsieur Dupont," Laurent said kindly, "it is natural to feel nervous. This estate is important, and the work is not always easy. But you do not have to face these challenges alone." Dupont nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Laurent continued, "Amara's knowledge and skills are a great asset to this place. I am glad she is here." Dupont looked at Amara again. For the first time, he saw her not just as a maid, but as a person with real talents and value. Later that afternoon, Dupont and Amara sat together in the garden. Dupont spoke quietly. "Thank you, Amara. Today, you showed everyone how capable you are. I am sorry I ever doubted you." Amara smiled gently. "We all have strengths, Monsieur Dupont. Sometimes, it takes courage to show them." Dupont nodded. "You have helped me see things differently. I want to work together, as a team." Amara's eyes shone with warmth. "I would like that very much." As the sun set behind the hills, the estate seemed more alive than ever. The crisis had brought change. Dupont's panic was replaced with hope, and a new respect had grown between two people who once thought they were worlds apart. From that day on, the estate's future looked brighter not just because of money or plans, but because of trust and friendship. The morning after the meeting, the estate buzzed with a new energy. The guests had left, but their visit left a mark on everyone. Monsieur Laurent was pleased with how things had gone, especially with Amara's calm and clear words during the discussion. Monsieur Dupont, however, still felt the weight of his own insecurity. Though Amara had helped in the meeting, Dupont worried if he could truly keep up with Laurent's expectations. Yet, deep inside, a small spark of hope had begun to grow. That day, Laurent called Dupont to his study. The room was filled with books, maps, and notes about the estate's future. Dupont, Laurent said, folding his hands, I have been thinking. This estate is not just about buildings or land. It is about people. The people who work here are the true strength of this place. Dupont nodded, listening carefully. Laurent continued, I want you to work closely with Amara. Her knowledge of the language and the culture is valuable. She has shown great skill, and I believe she can help us both. Dupont looked surprised but pleased. Thank you, Monsieur Laurent. I will do my best. Amara, meanwhile, went about her daily work quietly. She cleaned the rooms, prepared the meals, and made sure everything was in its place. But now, her role felt different. She was no longer invisible. She was part of the team, a key part. In the afternoon, Dupont and Amara sat together in the office. They opened letters from local officials, reading and translating them carefully. Amara corrected Dupont's mistakes gently, and Dupont listened with growing respect. Language is not just words, Amara said softly. It is the heart of communication. When we understand each other, we can work better. Dupont smiled. You are right. I have learned more in these days with you than in years of studying alone. Their teamwork grew stronger with each passing day. Amara's calm confidence helped Dupont feel less alone in his duties. Laurent noticed this change and often praised both of them for their work. One afternoon, a problem arose that tested their new partnership. A shipment of supplies meant for the estate had been delayed at the port, causing worry among the staff. Laurent needed to write a letter to the supplier, explaining the situation and asking for quick delivery. Dupont felt nervous. The letter had to be perfect. Amara offered to help. Together, they sat down and wrote the letter carefully, choosing words that were polite but clear. When Laurent read the letter, he smiled and said, "Excellent. This will keep our suppliers happy and show our professionalism." The experience gave Dupont confidence. He realized that mistakes were part of learning and that it was okay to ask for help. Days turned into weeks, and the estate began to run more smoothly than ever. Laurent's plans for the farm and the village moved forward. Dupont and Amara worked side by side, their respect for each other growing stronger. One evening, as they closed the office, Dupont looked at Amara and said quietly, "Thank you for stepping in when I needed you most. You saved me." Amara smiled warmly. "We all have moments when we need help. I am glad I could be there for you." That night, Dupont went to bed feeling lighter. The fear that had once filled his heart was slowly fading. He knew challenges would come, but now he was ready to face them with Amara's friendship beside him. Outside, the stars shone brightly over the estate, a quiet promise of new beginnings and stronger bonds. The estate was calm in the early morning light. Soft rays of sun filtered through the tall windows of the main house, warming the wooden floors and lighting up the rooms. The birds chirped outside, and a gentle breeze moved the curtains. It was a peaceful start to what promised to be a busy day. Monsieur Laurent had planned a small gathering for the evening, a chance to celebrate the progress on the estate and to thank the people who had worked hard to make it happen. Invitations had been sent to local neighbors, business people, and friends from nearby villages. Dupont was busy organizing the details. He walked through the rooms, checking that everything was in order. The flowers were fresh, the tables were set, and the food was prepared by the kitchen staff. Amara moved gracefully around the estate, assisting where needed but also making sure the guests would feel welcome. As the afternoon went on, DuPont noticed a figure walking up the driveway. It was a woman, dressed simply but with an air of confidence. She carried a small bag and looked around as if she was not sure where to go. DuPont approached her carefully. "Good afternoon, madam. Can I help you?" The woman smiled gently. "Bonjour, monsieur. My name is Sophie. I am a friend of Monsieur Laurent." DuPont nodded politely. "Please come inside. Monsieur Laurent is expecting guests this evening, but I can take you to him." Sophie followed DuPont into the house, her eyes curious as she looked around the elegant rooms. When they reached the drawing room, Laurent was there, reading a book by the window. He looked up and smiled warmly. "Sophie. It has been a long time," Laurent said, standing to greet her. Sophie smiled back. "Indeed, Laurent. I wanted to visit and see your new home." Laurent turned to DuPont. "This is Monsieur DuPont, my estate manager. DuPont, this is Sophie, an old friend from Paris." DuPont nodded, feeling the usual tension in his chest but keeping his voice steady. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Madame Sophie." Sophie's eyes fell on Amara, who was quietly standing by the door. "And who is this?" she asked kindly. "This is Amara," Laurent answered. "She helps manage the estate in many ways." Sophie smiled warmly at Amara. "It is a pleasure, Amara. I have heard good things about you." The afternoon passed quickly as they talked about the estate, plans for the future, and memories of Paris. Sophie's presence brought a new light to the house. She spoke with a soft, thoughtful voice and asked many questions about the work and the people. Later, when the guests began to arrive for the evening gathering, Sophie stayed close to Laurent. DuPont and Amara worked together to greet the visitors and keep everything running smoothly. As the sun set and the lights were turned on, the estate filled with laughter and music. The neighbors shared stories, and the smell of delicious food filled the air. Laurent moved from group to group, proud of what he had built. At one point, Sophie pulled Laurent aside for a quiet conversation. DuPont watched from a distance, curious about what they might be discussing. After a few minutes, Sophie approached DuPont. "Monsieur DuPont, may I speak with you privately?" DuPont nodded and followed her to a small room near the garden. Sophie looked serious. "I wanted to tell you something important. Laurent is not just a wealthy man with a beautiful estate. He has many secrets and a complicated past." DuPont was surprised but listened carefully. Sophie continued, "He trusts you, and he values your help. But there are people who might want to take advantage of him. You must be careful." DuPont felt a new kind of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He realized that managing the estate was more than just organizing work and speaking French well. It was about protecting the man who had welcomed him into this world. When the evening ended and the guests said their goodbyes, Laurent thanked DuPont and Amara for their hard work. "Tonight was wonderful," Laurent said. "I could not have done it without you." DuPont smiled quietly. "We are glad to help, monsieur." Amara nodded, feeling proud and hopeful. As the house grew quiet once more, DuPont stood by the window, looking out at the dark garden. The stars twinkled above, but his mind was full of questions. Who were the people Sophie had warned about? What challenges lay ahead for the estate and for Laurent? For the first time, DuPont understood that his role was more important than he had imagined. It was not just about language or management, it was about trust, loyalty, and courage. And with Amara by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The days after the evening gathering passed quietly at first, but DuPont's mind remained busy. Sophie's warning echoed in his thoughts. Who might want to take advantage of Monsieur Laurent? The question made him watch more closely, listen more carefully, and think more deeply. Amara noticed DuPont's seriousness. One afternoon, as they walked together in the garden, she asked gently, "Monsieur DuPont, is something troubling you?" DuPont sighed. "Yes, Amara. Sophie said there are people who might cause problems for Monsieur Laurent. I want to protect him, but I don't know how." Amara stopped and looked at him with calm eyes. "We protect each other by being honest and working together. Trust is the strongest shield." Her words gave DuPont strength. He realized that no matter what came, he was not alone. One morning, as DuPont and Amara worked in the office, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar and the words careful but serious. It was from a nearby landowner, warning Laurent about a possible dispute over property boundaries. DuPont showed the letter to Laurent. The millionaire's face grew serious but calm. "This is a challenge," Laurent said quietly. "But it is not the first we have faced. We will meet it with honesty and fairness." DuPont felt a deep respect for Laurent's steady heart. Together, they began to prepare a response, making sure every word was clear and respectful. In the days that followed, DuPont and Amara spent long hours studying maps, legal papers, and old documents. Amara's sharp mind and DuPont's careful nature made them a strong team. One afternoon, Laurent called a meeting with the local leaders. DuPont and Amara stood beside him, ready to speak and support the estate's position. The discussion was tense, but honest. Thanks to the careful preparation, the dispute was settled peacefully. The neighbors left with respect for Laurent and the estate. That evening, as the estate grew quiet, Laurent invited DuPont and Amara to join him in the study. "I am proud of both of you," Laurent said warmly. "You have shown loyalty, courage, and wisdom. This estate is more than land and money, it is a family." DuPont smiled, feeling a new confidence. Amara looked around the room and said softly, "We have all found a place where we belong." From that day forward, the estate changed. DuPont was no longer just a manager with doubts. He was a trusted partner. Amara was no longer only a maid but a respected voice and friend. Laurent was no longer just a distant millionaire but a man surrounded by people who cared deeply for the future. Together, they faced new challenges with hope and strength. The estate flourished, and the village grew closer. And the language that had once divided them became the bridge that united them all. Outside, under the wide sky, the stars shone brightly, a promise of new beginnings, friendship, and respect.